The first rock hit my front window at 2 in the morning. I shot up out of bed, heart pounding, just in time to hear a second one clatter off the glass. Dragging on a pair of jeans, I rushed downstairs to see what was going on, and there she was, standing in my front yard like a deranged scarecrow. Karren McAllister, president of our HOA, clutching another rock in her manicured hand. Yeah, you heard me right. The head of our neighborhood's almighty HOA was trying to bust out my windows like a common criminal. I yanked open the door. "Karren, what the hell are you doing?" She dropped the rock like a kid caught red-handed. "This is what you get, Hank Foster. You think you can ignore my notices?" I blinked hard, trying to make sense of this fever dream. "Notices? For what? My grass is mowed, my trash cans are hidden. What could you possibly be mad about now?" Karren's face twisted into that classic, tight-lipped Karren rage I'd seen too many times at our monthly meetings. "The color of your shutters is a violation. I told you forest green is not HOA approved. You're throwing rocks at my house over a paint color," I barked, stepping onto the porch. She took a wobbly step back, heels sinking into my lawn. "You left me no choice. You ignored the fines. You disrespected the authority of the HOA," I laughed, half out of disbelief, half out of rage. "You're insane." That seemed to snap something in her. Karren lunged forward like she was going to grab me, then realized I was holding my phone, recording every second. "You're going to regret this," she hissed before stomping off into the night. I stood there, stunned for a second. But then something clicked in my brain. This wasn't just petty harassment anymore. She had crossed a serious line, and I had proof, and you better believe I wasn't about to let it slide. By the time the sun clawed its way over the rooftops, I was already seated at my kitchen table, a strong cup of coffee in hand, my phone buzzing beside me. I had sent the footage to my buddy Mark, who happened to be a deputy sheriff, right after Karren's little late-night performance. Now my inbox was lighting up like a Christmas tree with messages from him. At 7 sharp, a knock echoed through the house. I opened the door to find Mark standing there, his uniform crisp, his expression hard. "Hank," he said, stepping in without waiting for an invite, "I watched the video. That wasn't just harassment. She committed felony vandalism and attempted breaking and entering." I set my coffee down with a sharp clink. "You serious?" "Dead serious. Throwing objects at an occupied dwelling. In this state, that's a felony if the property damage could have endangered someone inside. And considering she was about to storm the porch, that bumps it up to attempted unlawful entry." My stomach twisted. "What do we do?" Mark pulled out a small notepad. "First, I need you to officially file a police report, then we'll issue a warrant. With your footage, it's open and shut." I filled out the report, every word making my hands tremble with a mix of rage and disbelief. As Mark left, promising swift action, I glanced across the street. Sure enough, there she was, standing stiffly on her pristine front lawn, arms crossed, acting like queen of the cul-de-sac. She didn't know yet. And that made me grin. By noon, a patrol car cruised into the neighborhood. Curtains twitched. Lawnmowers stopped mid-churn. People came out under the pretense of checking mail or trimming hedges. The officer walked straight to Karren's door and rang the bell. She answered, still in her designer tracksuit, looking like she hadn't slept a wink. As soon as the officer spoke, her face drained of color. She tried to slam the door, but he wedged his boot in the frame and calmly informed her she was being placed under arrest. Neighbors openly gawked as she was cuffed right there on her marble porch. A few gasped. One lady across the street clapped once before quickly stopping herself. I leaned against my truck, arms folded, watching the queen fall from her throne. She caught my eye as they led her to the cruiser, her mouth opening like she wanted to screech something at me, but the officer nudged her along before she could get a word out. Later that evening, my neighbor Gloria came over carrying a plate of brownies like some sort of suburban peace offering. "I can't believe it," she said, setting the plate down. "Karren always acted like she owned the place, but getting arrested, in front of everyone." I poured us both a drink. "It wasn't just an act. She really thought she was above the law." Gloria leaned closer, lowering her voice. You know she's been embezzling from the HOA fund, right? My eyebrows shot up. Say what now? She nodded gravely. A few of us have been suspicious for a while. Last year, we voted to resurface the pool deck. She said it cost $20,000. But my cousin runs a contracting company. He said that job shouldn't have been more than 5. I rubbed my temples. And nobody did anything. She threatened anyone who questioned her. Fines, liens, even lawsuits. People were too scared to push back. I sat back, mind racing. Not anymore. Gloria smiled for the first time. Exactly. With the arrest, we can petition for an emergency meeting to remove her and audit the books. The next few days moved like a wildfire. Flyers circulated. Whispers turned into open discussions. I printed out copies of the police report and discreetly handed them to the homeowners who seemed hesitant. Seeing the official document with Karren's full name listed under defendant snapped people out of their fear. At the emergency meeting, the community center was packed, standing room only. People who hadn't attended a single HOA meeting in years showed up, buzzing with pent-up anger. The interim president, an elderly man named Mr. Dalton, called the meeting to order. His voice shook slightly, but there was a fire in his eyes. The first order of business, he said, tapping the gavel, is the immediate removal of Karren McAllister from her position as HOA president due to criminal charges and misconduct. A unanimous vote followed, no hesitation, no abstentions. Then came the audit motion. Gloria presented the evidence. She had gathered photos of the cracked, uneven resurfacing, contractor estimates, copies of financial statements with suspiciously large miscellaneous expenses. As people pored over the documents, a low murmur grew into angry muttering. Karren hadn't just overcharged for the pool. There were phantom landscaping projects, fake maintenance fees, and even a supposed community security system that no one had ever seen installed. Dalton straightened his frail shoulders. We will be contacting the district attorney to press charges for embezzlement, and we will hire an independent firm to audit every transaction from the last 5 years. The room erupted into cheers. The next morning, as I was gathering some tools from my garage, a news van rolled down the street. A reporter hopped out, a microphone in hand, her cameraman lugging gear behind her. "Are you Hank Foster?" she asked breathlessly. "Depends who's asking," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "I'm with Channel 4. We heard about the arrest and the HOA scandal. Would you be willing to talk?" I gave her a long look. The old Hank might have said no, but after everything? After the rocks, the threats, the years of nonsense? "Yeah," I said. "I got a few things to say." We set up in my driveway. She asked about the incident, the video, the aftermath. I told the truth, plain and simple. How one person tried to turn a neighborhood into her personal kingdom, and how a community took it back. As we wrapped, I noticed more neighbors stepping outside, waving at me, smiling. Some even gave me thumbs up. For the first time since moving into this neighborhood, it felt like a real community and not a kingdom under siege. A few weeks later, Karren's trial date was announced. Felony vandalism, attempted unlawful entry, and pending embezzlement charges. Her lawyer tried to argue mental exhaustion, but the evidence was overwhelming. She pled guilty to the vandalism charge in exchange for a reduced sentence, but still faced a hefty fine and probation. The embezzlement case was ongoing, with the DA determined to make an example out of her. Meanwhile, the HOA underwent massive reforms. Term limits were introduced, financial transparency rules were implemented, and a rotating oversight committee was established so no single person could ever seize control again. One afternoon, as I was installing a new mailbox because, of course, Karren had made mailbox designs, a Battleground 2 Mark cruised by in his squad car and rolled down the window. "You're a legend around here now," he said, grinning. I shrugged. "Just got tired of bullies thinking they could do whatever they want." He tipped an imaginary hat. "Good thing you did, Hank. Good thing you did." And for once, standing there under a clear blue sky in a neighborhood free from tyranny, I believed him. A few days after the news segment aired, I was out back fixing a loose fence post when a black SUV rolled slowly down the street, tinted windows gleaming under the afternoon sun. It didn't belong to anyone I recognized. I wiped my hands on my jeans, watching it inch past like a shark circling prey. It came to a stop just beyond my driveway. Two men in dark suits stepped out. One had a leather binder tucked under his arm, the other carried a briefcase. "You Hank Foster?" the taller one called out, his voice steady but not unfriendly. "Yeah," I said, setting down my hammer. "Special Agent Walker, FBI. This is Special Agent Ramirez. Mind if we have a word?" Blood rushed in my ears. I forced myself to nod. "Sure, what's this about?" Walker flipped open a badge. "We're here regarding your neighborhood's HOA. Seems your recent incident brought some things to light." I led them into the garage, pulling the door down halfway for some privacy. Ramirez clicked open the briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents, sliding them onto my workbench. "We've been investigating a series of fraudulent HOA organizations across the state," Walker explained. "Turns out Karren McAllister and a few others have ties to a shell company siphoning maintenance funds from multiple communities. Yours included." I stared at the papers. Bank statements, forged invoices, wire transfers to offshore accounts. It was worse than anyone had imagined. "So she wasn't just stealing from us," I said slowly, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. "She was part of something bigger." "Exactly," Ramirez said, tapping the top page. "And thanks to your footage and the resulting audit, we finally have enough to move forward." I leaned on the bench, trying to process. "What do you need from me?" "We'd like you to testify," Walker said. "You're a key witness. Your video, the police report, and your experience with the HOA's practices will be critical." I didn't hesitate. "I'll do it." They nodded, gathering the documents back into the briefcase. As they left, Ramirez handed me a card. "If anything unusual happens, call us directly, no matter how small it seems." That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with possibilities. Hidden assets, co-conspirators, other neighborhoods still trapped under similar regimes. Somewhere around 4 in the morning, I made a decision. If Karren and her cronies thought they could intimidate people into silence, they were about to learn differently. The next morning, I met with Gloria and a few trusted neighbors at the community center. I laid out everything the agents had told me. Their faces hardened with a resolve I hadn't seen before. "We need to protect ourselves," Gloria said, her voice firm. "If they're desperate, they might try to cover their tracks. We document everything," I said. "Every meeting, every conversation, every suspicious car that drives by." Tom, the retired firefighter who lived 2 doors down, volunteered to organize nightly neighborhood watches. Mrs. Patel, who ran the local bakery, offered her shop as a safe meeting point if things got hairy. It felt like preparing for battle, but none of us backed down. 3 nights later, it started. First, someone slashed the tires on Gloria's car. Then Tom found deep scratches gouged into his front door. Mrs. Patel's bakery was broken into, though nothing was stolen. Each time we filed police reports. Each time I forwarded the incidents to Agents Walker and Ramirez. Finally, around midnight one evening, my security cameras caught something chilling. A figure in a hoodie creeping along the side of my house, carrying what looked like a gas can. I called it in immediately. Within minutes, cruisers swarmed the street. They caught the guy trying to pry open my back window. It wasn't some random thug. It was Kevin Ross, Karren's lapdog and former HOA treasurer. Under questioning, he cracked like an egg. Admitted he'd been paid to intimidate me into retracting my testimony. The DA hit him with attempted burglary and conspiracy to commit arson charges. It made the evening news again, and this time the story exploded statewide. More agents descended on our little corner of suburbia. Subpoenas flew like confetti. Homes were raided. Bank accounts frozen. Karren's shell company scam unraveled completely. She wasn't just facing vandalism and embezzlement charges anymore. She was now at the center of a federal racketeering investigation. The trial date arrived 6 months later. By then, the community had transformed. The HOA was entirely restructured. An independent financial advisory board managed all funds. Monthly open forums replaced the secretive meetings Karren had relished. Walking into the courthouse, I spotted Gloria, Tom, Mrs. Patel, and a dozen other neighbors gathered together, a silent wall of support. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Karren sat at the defense table, looking gaunt and haggard. Her designer clothes hung off her like they belonged to someone else. No high-priced lawyer this time, just a weary public defender flipping anxiously through a thick folder. When I took the stand, I didn't hold anything back. I detailed everything: the harassment, the criminal mismanagement, the intimidation tactics. The jury hung onto every word. Prosecutors piled on evidence after evidence. Financial records, witness testimonies, expert audits. The defense had nothing but flimsy excuses. The most damning moment came when Ramirez played a recorded phone call between Karren and Kevin Ross, where she explicitly ordered him to scare that nosy neighbor into silence. The courtroom went dead quiet when the tape ended. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts: racketeering, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit arson, felony vandalism, and attempted unlawful entry. The judge didn't mince words during sentencing. "You abused your position of trust to enrich yourself and terrorize your community," she said, glaring down at Karren with the kind of disdain you can't fake. "You will serve 20 years in federal prison." Karren didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, hollow-eyed, as the bailiff led her away in cuffs. Afterward, outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones thrust forward, flashes popping. A young journalist pushed through the crowd. "Mr. Foster, do you have any statement for the public?" I looked at the sea of cameras, then beyond them to my neighbors, standing proud and unbowed. "Yeah," I said. "Never let anyone bully you into silence. One voice can tear down a whole empire if you're willing to stand your ground." The crowd erupted into cheers. Over the next few months, things only got better. Property values actually rose once word spread that our HOA was one of the few in the area with transparent, resident-led governance. New families moved in, drawn by the sense of community we had fought so hard to reclaim. One afternoon, I found Tom painting a mural on the side of the community center. It showed a tree with deep roots and sprawling branches, each branch labeled with words like courage, unity, and justice. Gloria walked up beside me, shielding her eyes from the sun. "Looks good, doesn't it?" she said. I nodded. "It's not just a painting, it's a reminder," she smiled. "That no matter how deep the rot goes, good people can still stand tall." I stayed there a long time, watching the mural come to life, feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. Eventually, I headed home, passing by neatly trimmed lawns, kids riding bikes, neighbors chatting on porches. No more secret fines. No more petty dictatorships. No more fear, just a community finally free to thrive. The weeks after the trial brought a strange, almost eerie quiet to the neighborhood. It was as if the place itself was catching its breath after years of being under siege. The air felt lighter, laughter echoed down the sidewalks, and for the first time in a long while, people stopped locking themselves indoors at the first sign of dusk. I spent most of my mornings restoring my neglected garden, digging out the stubborn weeds that had crept in while I'd been busy fighting battles. One afternoon, as I knelt by the rose bushes, a battered tan sedan pulled up to the curb. Out stepped a woman in her early 50s, wearing a simple blazer and carrying a heavy leather portfolio. "You Hank Foster?" she asked, her voice steady but worn, like someone who'd spent too much time in courtrooms and board meetings. "Yeah," I said, brushing dirt off my hands. "Who's asking?" "Name's Miranda Cole," she said, offering a firm handshake. "I'm the court-appointed receiver for the HOA accounts. Judge ordered a full forensic analysis after the trial. Mind if I come in?" I led her to the porch, where we sat at the table under the shade of the awning. Miranda opened her portfolio, pulling out a thick sheaf of papers. "I thought you might want to see this," she said, flipping through until she landed on a page marked with several red flags. Turns out Karren wasn't just dipping into HOA funds. She used HOA-owned property as collateral for a series of private loans. I leaned forward, frowning. "What kind of loans?" "Predatory ones," Miranda said grimly. "High-interest, short-term loans from shady lenders." She leveraged everything she could, the community pool, the clubhouse, even the green belt. My stomach twisted. "What happens to the properties?" "Normally, they'd be seized to cover the debts," she said, setting down the papers. "But because the loans were taken fraudulently without the community's consent, we have grounds to nullify them. It'll take time, though. Lawyers, filings, hearings." I blew out a long breath. "And if we lose, you won't," Miranda said, her voice sharp with certainty. "Not with the evidence we have, but the community needs to vote to formally authorize the legal action." By the next evening, we packed the community center again, just like we had months ago. The energy was different this time, confident, focused. Miranda stood at the front, explaining the situation without sugarcoating it. People listened carefully, some with folded arms, others nodding along. When she finished, I stood up. "We fought hard to take our neighborhood back," I said, scanning the faces in the crowd. "Now we have to protect it. This isn't just about money or property, it's about making sure no one ever uses us like that again." The vote was unanimous. Again, afterward, while people lingered to chat, Miranda pulled me aside. "There's something else," she said, lowering her voice. "We found a second set of books, hidden." I raised an eyebrow. "Hidden where?" "In a storage unit registered under a fake company name," she said. "It was flagged during the asset search. When we opened it, we found records dating back almost 15 years. My mind reeled. 15 years, but the HOA's only been around for 7. Miranda nodded grimly. "Exactly. It looks like Karren had been playing this game long before she moved here, setting up fake HOAs in new developments, manipulating the first board elections, and then bleeding the communities dry before moving on." I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. "How many neighborhoods?" "At least 6, she said. "Possibly more. Some of them collapsed completely, homes foreclosed, property values tanked, families ruined." Anger boiled up, hot and immediate. "Can she be charged for those too?" "Federal prosecutors are already building the case," Miranda said. "It's bigger than anyone thought." The news broke a week later. Headlines splashed across every local outlet. "Serial HOA fraudster brought down after years-long scheme." Photos of Karren in her orange jumpsuit filled the screen. The FBI announced additional charges: wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft. She was looking at life behind bars. Meanwhile, back home, life moved forward. Slowly, carefully, but with a kind of joy that hadn't existed before. We held a neighborhood fair in the park, something Karren would have fined us into oblivion for even suggesting. Kids painted faces, a local band played covers of old rock songs, and Gloria organized a pie-eating contest that ended with half the participants covered in blueberry filling. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the green, Tom approached, carrying 2 cold lemonades. "You ever think we'd get here?" he asked, handing me one. "Honestly," I said, tilting my head back to watch the sky streak with orange and purple. "There were days I wasn't sure." He chuckled, the sound light and easy. "You know, the city council reached out. They want to use us as a model for neighborhood governance reform." I blinked. Seriously, he said. "They're drafting a bill to regulate HOAs statewide. Transparency requirements, term limits, criminal background checks for board members." I took a long drink of the lemonade, feeling the tartness bite at my tongue. "That's huge," Tom nodded. "They want you to testify at the hearings." For a moment I just stood there, the fair bustling around me, the scent of grilled burgers and fresh popcorn thick in the air. "Why not?" I said finally. "If it helps keep this from happening to anyone else." The hearing was scheduled for early fall. The council chamber was packed when I arrived, wearing the one good suit I owned. Reporters lined the walls, notebooks ready. City officials sat at a long dais, faces solemn. When they called my name, I stepped up to the microphone. I talked about the fear, the petty tyranny, the way one person's greed nearly tore a community apart. I talked about the strength it took to fight back and the neighbors who stood together, who refused to be broken. When I finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then came the applause, loud, sustained, genuine. The bill passed unanimously a month later. Back home, life kept improving. We planted a community garden in the greenbelt Karren had tried to mortgage away. School kids painted murals on the clubhouse walls. Seniors held yoga classes in the park. One evening, as I was locking up my front gate, Gloria waved from across the street. "We're thinking about Christmas lights this year," she called. "Big ones, whole street lit up," I laughed. "Count me in." As I turned toward my house, the porch light flickering warmly, I allowed myself a moment to breathe it all in. The laughter drifting on the breeze. The gentle hum of a neighborhood alive and thriving. No more hidden fines, no more threats, no more living under someone's boot, just home. Real, honest, and ours.